Most people won't say it out loud, but walking through life with almost no close friends isn't always just bad luck. Many who end up isolated didn't simply drift away from people. They followed invisible psychological patterns that quietly pushed connection out of reach. Not because they're flawed, not because they're unworthy, but because their mind works in ways that don't fit the social world most people live in. Today, we're pulling back the layers, not the sugar-coated version you see on self-help channels, but the version grounded in real human psychology. If you've ever wondered why you end up standing alone, even when you don't want to, stay with me. This is the truth behind it. Some people don't struggle socially because they lack charm or confidence. They struggle because their brain won't shut off long enough to let connections form. They don't simply experience a conversation, they analyze it. They monitor it. They review it like a security camera replaying footage. Psychologists call this cognitive hypervigilance, a state where the brain is constantly scanning, observing, comparing, predicting. It's not anxiety as in fear of people, it's the habit of analyzing people. Instead of relaxing into the moment, your mind becomes a live commentator. Did I sound weird? Was that joke awkward? Did they seem bored? What did their tone mean? Why did they pause before answering? And while your brain runs this internal diagnostic, the person in front of you senses something they can't name, not coldness, but distance. Your words are there, your presence is there, but you are somewhere inside your head, watching the moment instead of living in it. People don't bond with the version of you that's analyzing. They bond with the version that feels alive, relaxed, emotionally present. But hyperanalysis replaces presence with performance, and connection can't grow on a stage. Another pattern shows up in people who rarely keep long-term friendships. Their ability to read people is too good. Not fake empath stuff, real social perception. They notice when someone laughs too loudly to fit in. They sense when attention-seeking is disguised as vulnerability. They spot dramatics, manipulation, performance, flattery, power games instantly. And once you see these patterns clearly, it's impossible to unsee them. Most social groups depend on tiny, harmless illusions, pretending to be impressed, laughing at the unfunny, acting surprised even when you're not, offering validation you don't fully mean. But highly perceptive people don't participate in this theater. They don't fake reactions. They don't exaggerate enthusiasm. They don't play along, not because they're rude, but because they're honest to the bone. And that honesty, as pure as it is, often makes people uncomfortable. Because when you're real, you accidentally reveal how fake everyone else is. To them, your silence becomes arrogance. Your neutrality becomes judgment. Your independence becomes superiority. But you're not trying to be above anyone. You're simply allergic to pretending. And in a world fueled by surface-level validation, authenticity often looks like a threat. Friendship is built on small emotional exchanges, asking for advice, venting, celebrating together, leaning on each other. But some people don't need that. Not because they're unemotional, but because their emotional operating system is internal. They process pain privately. They solve problems alone. They regulate emotions without external help. Psychology calls this internal emotional autonomy, a trait that looks strong from the outside but quietly sabotages belonging. Because connection doesn't come from perfection, it comes from vulnerability. When you never ask for help, people subconsciously stop offering it. When you never show emotional need, people assume you don't want closeness. When you handle everything alone, others feel unnecessary in your life. You don't push people away directly, you simply give them no doorway to enter. People don't bond with your strength, they bond with your cracks. And when you hide all your cracks, you unintentionally choose solitude. Some people are natural outsiders because they don't and can't follow the unspoken rules that glue most groups together. They don't copy behavior. They don't follow trends blindly. They don't agree just to keep the peace. They don't pretend to think what everyone else thinks. This isn't rebellion, it's neurological independence. Psychologists call it low conformity orientation, a trait that breeds originality, creativity, and integrity. But society often rewards sameness, not difference. Most groups bond by mirroring each other, shared jokes, shared habits, shared opinions. But if you're the kind of person who questions everything, who thinks for themselves, who doesn't blend into group dynamics, people admire you, but they don't often get close to you. Because closeness requires similarity, and your strength is that you're different. When everyone laughs, you wonder what the joke reveals about them. When everyone follows, you're the one quietly stepping back, analyzing the pattern. When everyone agrees, you ask the forbidden question, why? These traits make you authentic. But they also place you outside the social circle, not rejected, just unmatched. Here is a truth most people want to admit. Some individuals struggle with closeness because they don't naturally express emotions in a way others can read. They can care deeply, but not communicate it. They can feel intensely, but stay silent. They can love strongly, but show nothing on the outside. Psychologists call this emotional inarticulation, not the absence of emotion, but the absence of outward expression. You may support people logically, give great advice, help in practical ways, and others appreciate it, but they don't feel emotionally seen by you. Because humans don't bond over logic, they bond over shared emotional reality. By the time you process how you feel, the moment has usually passed. By the time you're ready to speak, the connection window is closed. People drift away quietly, not because you don't care, but because they never felt it, and you're left wondering why your good intentions weren't enough. People without close friends rarely lost them suddenly. It happens slowly, through micro-patterns, replying too late, keeping emotions private, avoiding small talk, refusing to pretend, analyzing instead of engaging, choosing independence over connection, being too real for people who prefer masks. Solitude doesn't hit like an earthquake, it builds like dust, one quiet moment at a time. And one day, you look around and realize you've walked a long path alone. Not because you're broken, not because you're unlovable, but because your mind values truth more than belonging. You don't know how to fake connection, and you refuse to dilute your identity just to fit. Not having many friends doesn't make you defective. It simply means your psychological wiring isn't compatible with shallow connection. You're not too much, you're too real. And real people are rare, which is why they often walk alone, but loneliness begins to fade once you understand your patterns. Once you see why you are the way you are, you stop asking, why don't I have friends? And start thinking, maybe most people can't meet me where I naturally stand. Ever feel like you're on the outside looking in? There is a hidden experience shared by many who end up on the outskirts of social life, the burden of noticing too much. You don't just see people, you read them. Micro-expressions, tone shifts, inconsistencies, subtle lies, emotional fluctuations, they all hit your radar. Most people glide through interactions without thinking deeply. But you catch the things they'd rather keep invisible. The uncomfortable truth is, humans don't usually like being seen that clearly. You're the kind of person who can sense discomfort beneath a smile or insecurity behind arrogance. You see the fear beneath the bragging and the exhaustion under the mask. You see the person, not the performance. And while this is a gift, it creates a strange paradox. The more deeply you see others, the harder it is for them to feel comfortable around you. People fear being read, so they keep their distance. Not because you're unlikable, but because your perception strips away their camouflage. And then there's the social noise. The modern social world is loud not physically, but emotionally. It's filled with unnecessary commentary, constant chatter, and shallow bonding. Some people thrive in it, but your mind is wired differently. You prefer silence with meaning over noise without purpose. You prefer depth over intensity. And society rarely rewards that. Groups often bond through gossip, shared complaints, and exaggerated reactions. But your mind filters all that noise out. You don't respond to it, you don't generate it, you don't perform it. This creates friction. People who need energetic validation think you don't like them. People who bond through shared excitement think you're bored. The truth is simple. You're not cold, you just don't connect through chaos. Your emotional system values resonance over volume. This makes you rare, and it also makes you misunderstood. Let's talk about one of the most misunderstood psychological patterns, hyperindependence. You learned, consciously or not, that relying on others is dangerous. Maybe people disappointed you, your needs were ignored, or you were forced to grow up too early. Hyperindependence feels like strength. It looks like competence, but it quietly destroys connection. When you never show need, people don't know how to show care. When you never open up, people don't know where they stand. When you always have it handled, people feel redundant in your life. Friendships are built on supporting each other. If you never give anyone a chance to matter, they eventually stop trying. Hyperindependence is often trauma wearing the mask of strength. And if you've lived in that mode long enough, you might not even notice how deeply it isolates you. Some people also approach social interaction like a chess game, always analyzing the next move. What should I say? Am I being too direct? Is this conversation safe? This mental over-strategizing often comes from a history of social unpredictability. When past relationships felt unstable, your mind learned to observe instead of participate. You trained yourself to anticipate reactions and minimize risks. But relationships don't grow when they're filtered through risk analysis. They grow through emotional spontaneity. People feel warmth when you let go, but letting go feels unsafe for you. This creates a tension. Your brain thinks it's protecting you, but your heart feels disconnected, and people sense the distance. This leads to one of the most painful patterns: emotional mismatch. You often feel either too intense, too deep, too calm, or too quiet. You experience emotions in a way that doesn't align with the social rhythm around you. Others may bond through exaggeration, but you bond through authenticity. This mismatch makes you believe something is wrong with you. But it's not wrong, it's just different wiring. You're not too much. You're too much for the wrong environment. You're not enough. You're not enough of what the average person expects. You are perfectly calibrated for depth, just misplaced in the shallow end. And people place silent expectations on you. Because you appear strong, people expect you to always be okay. Because you're independent, they assume you don't need support. Because you're perceptive, they expect you to handle emotional complexity alone. They don't realize you need gentleness, too. You need patience. You need understanding. You need someone who isn't intimidated by your depth. But most people project their assumptions onto you and then distance themselves because they think you don't need them. Meanwhile, you wait for someone to prove they actually care enough to stay. Many people assume that socially isolated individuals dislike others. But the truth is far more nuanced. You don't hate people. You hate the unwritten rules, the forced politeness, fake enthusiasm, and social politics. You're not rejecting people, you're rejecting the artificial system surrounding them. You crave real, raw, vulnerable connection. And because that's rare, you often end up alone, not by choice, but by filter. You would rather be alone than surrounded by illusions. And that's not a flaw, it's integrity. This leads to a specific kind of loneliness that doesn't look lonely. You're functional, successful, and self-sufficient. No one suspects anything. But internally, there is a quiet ache, a longing to be understood without explaining, a wish to be chosen without performing, a desire for closeness that doesn't cost you your authenticity. This loneliness isn't loud. It has the loneliness of someone who could connect deeply but hasn't found someone with the emotional depth to meet them. You're not missing quantity. You're missing resonance. And resonance is rare. There's a reason people who walk alone often have a deeper inner world than most. Isolation isn't just a consequence of psychological patterns, it's often a sign of internal richness. You think with nuance. You feel with depth. You question instinctively. You analyze naturally. You reflect constantly. You notice what others overlook. Your inner complexity makes superficial connection feel emotionally exhausting, not because you're better than anyone, but because your mind operates on a frequency where many people simply can't follow. You don't enjoy conversations that go nowhere. You don't feel energized by gossip or trends. You don't feel fulfilled by surface-level validation. You crave meaning. You crave substance. You crave conversations that ignite thought and reveal truth. This is the paradox. Your depth is your gift, but it also becomes a barrier. Most people don't have the capacity or desire to meet you where your mind naturally lives. And so you walk alone, not out of isolation, but out of misalignment. Here's one of the hardest truths for self-aware loners. You want connection, yet you instinctively pull away when someone gets too close. It's not sabotage. It's self-protection disguised as indifference. When someone gets emotionally close, your system activates old defenses. You retreat into silence. You overthink every word. You feel exposed. You fear misinterpretation. You fear relying on them. You fear being misunderstood. You fear losing the independence that has kept you safe. Closeness feels risky, even when the person means well. You might find yourself creating distance without realizing it, taking longer to answer messages, offering shorter replies, keeping the tone neutral, subtly stepping back. Others interpret this as disinterest, but in truth, you're overwhelmed. You don't pull away because you don't care. You pull away because you care more than you know how to handle. People who struggle with connection often carry an identity they never consciously chose, the identity of the observer. Somewhere in childhood or adolescence, you learned that watching was safer than participating. Maybe you felt different, maybe you weren't welcomed. Maybe you were criticized for expressing yourself, maybe your thoughts were dismissed. Maybe you felt invisible, so you adapted. You became the one who listens, not the one who shares. The one who studies others, not the one who is studied. The one who understands everyone, but is rarely understood. Once this identity takes root, it's incredibly hard to shed. You become good at noticing what others need but forget what you need. You become skilled at being present for people, but struggle to let people be present for you. You become comfortable in the shadows but ache quietly for someone to pull you into the light. Being the observer feels safe, but it also keeps you separate. And connection requires participation, not just perception. A subtle but powerful pattern among isolated individuals is this: your emotional timing rarely matches the moment. You feel things deeply but privately. You process slowly but thoroughly. You understand your emotions but only after reflection. This creates what psychologists call delayed emotional expression. You don't express feelings in real time, you express them in hindsight. By the time you're ready to open up, the emotional moment has passed. By the time you're ready to be vulnerable, the other person has moved on. By the time you're ready to speak, silence has already rewritten the relationship. People misinterpret this as lack of emotion. They don't realize you're simply processing. They don't understand that your emotions need space before they become words. This delay leads to missed opportunities for closeness, misunderstandings, and relationships that feel almost but not quite. It's not that you don't feel, it's that you feel later. And that difference changes everything. There's a stereotype that people with few friends are quiet or shy. But that's rarely the full truth. You're not quiet inside. Your mind is loud, intense, active, alive. You have entire conversations with yourself before speaking one sentence aloud. You explore ideas deeply before sharing an opinion. You analyze patterns others overlook entirely. You're not silent, you're selective. You don't speak unless your words have value. You don't contribute unless you feel safe. You don't open up unless the environment is right. You don't waste energy on people who won't understand you. The world mistakes your selectiveness for silence. But silence is not emptiness, it's wisdom choosing where to land. Because you're so selective, you often feel like you don't belong anywhere, not fully, not naturally. You can fit in almost anywhere, but nowhere feels like home. Every group has something slightly off, too shallow, too noisy, too chaotic, too rigid, too self-centered. You're adaptable but not aligned. This creates a lifelong sense of emotional homelessness. You drift, observing, participating superficially, leaving quietly when the energy feels wrong. You don't want crowds, you want resonance. You don't want many connections, you want the right ones. You don't want attention, you want understanding. And until you find people who match your depth, sensitivity, and honesty, you continue walking alone. Not by choice, not by accident, but by design. Here is the truth most people in your life may never tell you: you're not hard to love. You're hard to access. You're not difficult, cold, or detached. You're simply protected. You have high emotional standards, which is why you don't open up easily. You have strong internal boundaries, which is why not everyone gets in. You have depth, which is why only certain people can sustain a connection with you. And the few who do reach you will experience a level of loyalty, presence, and honesty they've never encountered before. Your connections may be few, but they are powerful, rare, real, life-changing. Because once someone earns access to your inner world, they find a depth most people never show. Self-awareness is the start of transformation. You don't need to become louder, more extroverted, or pretend to enjoy surface-level bonding. You don't need to abandon your depth, your independence, or your honesty. You only need to understand how your patterns shape your relationships, your hyper-awareness, your analytical mind, your delayed emotional expression, your high expectations, and your selective openness. When you understand these traits, you stop blaming yourself. You stop feeling broken. You stop wondering why you walk alone. You see the architecture of your mind and the path it created. Once you see the pattern, you can decide if you want to keep walking this way, or if you want to redesign how you connect. Not by becoming someone else, but by learning to let the right people in. If you've made it this far, It means you're not afraid of truth. You want to understand yourself deeply, honestly, without filters. So hear this: you're not alone because you're unworthy. You're alone because your mind doesn't accept shallow connection. There is nothing wrong with you. Your standards are high because your soul is deep. Your circle is small because your authenticity is rare. Your path is quiet because your inner world is loud. Once you recognize your patterns, you reclaim your power. You no longer wonder, why don't I have friends? Instead, you understand, not everyone can meet me, and that's okay. If you want more psychological truth without the sugarcoating, stay with this channel.